The Powered by the Apocalypse game engine has dramatically impacted the tabletop scene since 2010, but I think two key bits of advice from PBTA systems still persist in the game design sphere many years later. The original Apocalypse world encourages readers to play to find out what happens, and the popular hack Dungeon world recommends GMs draw maps but leave blanks. Jason Cox, writing for the Journal of Analog Game Studies, describes this kind of intentional emptiness as a method of creating emergent narratives, stories that are not scripted by a lone game master, but collaboratively imagined by everyone at the table. I broadly think this kind of playstyle is preferable. It's nice to include your friends' ideas in your games, and in my experience, their suggestions are more gripping and dramatic than anything I could come up with. But when you're reading about a specific game setting, it's a lot harder to incorporate emergent narratives. A setting guide is, on its face, all scripted, all predetermined information about a given place, all capital L lore. While a lot of ink has been spilled about whether or not lore is good or bad, I think Josh of the Rise Up Comus blog phrases one of the problems with writing tomes of history about your games pretty well. I do not have time to memorize splat books full of lore. I am no longer so cruel as to expect my players to read the splat books I write. It's not a game, it's homework. While many people do enjoy reading detailed and exhaustive descriptions of a setting, it puts a huge burden on your players and GMs to know exactly what happened when, which can absolutely bog down your session. As W.F. Smith of Prismatic Wasteland puts it, it is more interesting to say that an NPC is a veteran of the Clone Wars and let the reader's imagination fill in what the Clone Wars might have been, than to fully detail it when it isn't otherwise relevant. This is the strength of drawing maps with blank spaces. Whatever's left in the blanks is often way more exciting when it's not explained. I think Into the Riverlands, a system-neutral setting by Josh Hiddey, is a perfect example of how to straddle the line between lore dump and plot hook, a text that's full of interesting, weird details that provoke far more questions than it answers. In 20 short pages, Riverlands describes a fantasy world of crumbling empires, thriving cities, and awe-inspiring forests, while leaving off loose ends and lingering questions ripe for answering through play. While it still has plenty enough substance to draw a map, it's absolutely full of ambiguous proper nouns that will have you saying, "Oh shit, I can do something wild with this." W.F. Smith, in the same Prismatic Wasteland blog, writes that character creation is one of the most fruitful areas for communicating setting without setting forth a historical treatise on this land. Backgrounds inform the characters the players will play, but it serves the dual purpose of communicating setting without beating you over the head with it. Riverlands uses character backgrounds to great effect when communicating its own setting, as each of its major regions allows for some form of extrapolation based on the people coming out of those locations. I love the ways Riverlands both suggests the kind of person you can be with its backgrounds, while also implying a great deal about the place you come from based on the weird details of various professions. Let's take the trickster poet background as a starting point. The otter folk of the Riverlands have a long tradition of adventurous individuals who travel the rivers causing mischief and helping others in equal measure. In literally the first sentence, you can pull tons of flavor out of the setting by imagining its implications. What the hell is an otter folk? It's not a huge leap to assume they're anthropomorphic otters, but even then, how big are they? Human-sized? Otter-sized? Clearly they're large enough to navigate the world with relative ease, considering there is a long tradition of trickster poets in this setting. And if they can cause mischief as well as lend a paw, we can assume some level of both intelligence and playfulness, a desire to laugh at your misfortune, while also being friendly enough not to kick you while you're down. We also know they're adventurous, so we can assume otterfolk who take up the mantle of trickster poet are brave, cunning, and willing to take risks against potential dangers, such as the life of a traveler. Second sentence. The trickster poets of old were said to speak to the godfish. The what? What in the whole world is a godfish? This is what I love about Riverlands. It will casually drop the concept of godfishes in the middle of the 8th character background, and then just continue on as if nothing's happened. The map is drawn, but oh, there are most certainly sea monsters lurking in the blanks. Each background also gets a few items. For the trickster poet, a reed fiddle, a patchwork cloak, a godwood talisman, and a hunter's horn are all included. Again, you have to read between the lines to see the kind of person a trickster poet is, but add it all together, you can draw some really neat conclusions. The reed fiddle suggests musical talent, a patchwork cloak suggests frequent travel without much money for new clothes, a hunter's horn suggests athleticism, skill, and a community that might respond to such a horn call. And if you don't want to come up with an explanation for what a godwood talisman might be, occasionally Hitty will give you an extra nugget of world building. While godwood isn't explained right here in the Trickster Poet background, it does show up in the treasures section of the Great Barrier Forest. Riverlands does have underlying history and lore, but only for people keen enough to draw those connections for themselves, if such a thing is interesting to them. Murder Hobo writes in a devlog for Noctis Labyrinth of the utility of world building via breadcrumbs. Instead of creating a dense world for them to discover, you introduce a series of thinly connected specific details, separate them with a fruitful void, and see how it plays out at the table. Riverlands absolutely excels at weaving these interconnected, nearly invisible webs, only present to those with eyes to see. This text is just stuffed full of neat and strange concepts. You want to know what my favorite backgrounds in the setting are? The Heron Fisher and the Marsh Apiarist. I love the Heron Fisher because it's such a fun concept. You raise a heron from birth and use your companion to help catch fish. Pretty simple, but there's 6 types of herons to choose from. Salt heron, giant heron, diving heron, night heron. Nothing about these breeds of bird is explicitly defined, so my mind instantly turned the giant heron into an 8-foot terror bird, while the night heron could be a stealthy, shadowy wraith that strikes at fish and foe alike from the darkness. As for the marsh apiarist, you tend to a colony of wetland bees. What in the name of God is a wetland bee? All we know about them is that let me check my notes. They're like tiny buzzing magpies, bring you shiny trinkets. Oh, and they hold on to grudges passed down through their hive's memory. Tell me that's not the wildest shit you ever heard. That rules. Riverlands' details are so evocative and thought-provoking that I knew from page 4 that I had to tell other people about it. More people need to know about the marsh bees. All of Riverlands' weird details beg the reader to draw conclusions about the eccentric nature of the world. I don't have space to cover all 4 major regions of the text, but you can truly just throw a dart at the page and find something that could power a full campaign arc for your game. At the very end of the book, there's a section called Further Afield, describing backgrounds and motivations for characters who don't come from the Riverlands, Empire, Forest, or City of Bridges. In that section, you'll find a background titled Living Sacrifice, which describes a person whose spirit was ritually sacrificed as part of a religious ceremony, but whose body remains completely unharmed. This person was supposed to live the rest of their life as if they were dead, tending to a temple while their family mourned them, but they escaped to seek a new life from themselves. The kinds of questions you can pull from this paragraph-long backstory is a game master's dream. What kind of people are those who prepare their children for spiritual sacrifice? What actually happens to a person's soul during this ritual? Why do people tolerate this practice, and what benefits do they supposedly gain? Most important of all to a character who chooses this as their backstory, what do you do when everyone you've ever known considers you dead, even though you still draw breath? These are the kinds of questions that can only be answered through play, but the setting of Riverlands is perfect for getting those ideas churning in the first place. I think my enthusiasm should make clear that y'all should pick up Into the Riverlands. Of the game's 20 pages, I probably covered about a half page's worth of information. There is so much more left for you to uncover. I think the hardest part about implementing Riverlands into a tabletop game is figuring out how to make its rich lore fit with a particular game system. That is, of course, the downside of it being system neutral. But I think it's absolutely worth grappling with whatever game you want to drop Riverlands into for the opportunities this text will open up at your table. Hitty's done an impressive job of threading the needle between providing opportunities for storytelling while not overburdening readers with made-up history. If you're looking for a place to start a new campaign, or just want some new concepts, locations, and treasures to beef up an existing game, the Riverlands will provide. It's a precise, cleverly constructed setting that challenges readers to fill in its blanks with your own imagination, and will have you eager to play to find out what happens next. Hey everybody, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate everybody who takes the time to get through the end of my videos. If you liked the kind of work that I do here, I'm at AaronSXL on Twitter. My main site is aavoigt.com, where I talk about games, writing, and health policy. If you want a system neutral setting, I wrote one. It's Finley. a Midwest fantasy. I wrote it based off of my experiences living in Indiana for 10 years, and I think it's really neat. But it's very heavily inspired by the advice I got directly from Josh to write a system-neutral setting, because I just thought Riverlands was so cool. I was really glad to talk about it. Anyway, I also do 2 podcasts. The first is at Mortified Pod, where me and my friend Layla do critical media analysis. We just talked about Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. And I do another show at The Bible Boys, where me and my ex-evangelical friends Michael and Josh talk about Christian media. So if those seem like something that you all might be interested in, please check them out. Thank you, as always, for watching. I hope to have another video out in about 2 weeks. Until then, see ya!